I had already gotten dressed for the office and was now sitting in the kitchen with a cup of hot coffee. The morning newspaper, freshly delivered, lay on the table in front of me. Jennifer was still in the bedroom, getting ready for her workday. This morning was no different from any other weekday morning over the past 12 months. My eyes drifted across the headlines on the front page when I saw exactly what I had been expecting. Right there, in the center of the front page, Anthony had warned me the night before that it would be published. Anthony never made empty promises. If he said something would happen, it always did. Robert Tulson found murdered in his own garage. The article reported that Robert Tulson's body had been discovered in his garage the previous evening. He had been brutally beaten and then strangled to death. The report noted that the victim worked as an agent for the real estate company Colchis. Jennifer is also an employee of the Colchis agency. Law enforcement stated that there were no suspects at this time. The investigation had only just begun. I lost interest in the rest of the paper. Folding it, I placed it on the spot at the table where Jennifer usually ate breakfast. A pleasant wave of warmth spread through me as I mentally replayed all the circumstances and events that had led to this very morning. I was finishing my coffee when Jennifer appeared in the doorway of the kitchen. God, she looked stunning. My wife, whom I had been married to for 5 years, looked even more beautiful today than she had 7 years ago when we first met. There was no, "Good morning, honey." She simply pulled out a chair and poured herself a cup of coffee from the pot. It was hard to imagine just how badly our relationship had deteriorated over the past 12 months. Our eyes met for a brief second. A faint smile touched my lips as I acknowledged her presence. She didn't say a word to me. This had become the norm over the past 2 months. Ever since that major fight we had over her constantly increasing workload. She seemed to have closed herself off and refused to open up. That emotional distance was probably what troubled me the most. During our courtship and at the beginning of our marriage, Jennifer had been a warm, affectionate partner. I truly missed that intimacy and closeness. But it felt as though those days were gone forever. Jennifer picked up the newspaper with one hand while holding her coffee cup in the other. Her eyes quickly scanned the headlines and moved down the page as she took a sip. Suddenly, coffee spilled from her mouth, and her eyes looked as if they were about to pop out of their sockets. "Oh my God, no," she cried out. I remained seated in silence, focused entirely on her reaction to the article about Robert Tulson's murder. I felt no urge whatsoever to comment. Jennifer looked like she was about to throw up. She abruptly jumped to her feet and rushed toward the bathroom. I took a deep breath, stood up, and placed my cup in the dishwasher. Grabbing my briefcase, I headed to the garage and got behind the wheel of my car. I was completely unconcerned about how Jennifer was feeling. Her distress no longer stirred even the slightest sympathy in me. Allow me to introduce myself properly. My name is John Canella, although all my friends call me JC. I'm 29 years old, and I come from a Sicilian-rooted family out of the Italian neighborhood of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Most of my youth was spent getting into trouble alongside a group of other young Italian guys. We saw ourselves as the next generation of the mafia. I'll spare you most of the other questionable activities we were involved in and focus instead on the one event that radically altered the misguided direction of my life. Anthony Vitali and I were closer than biological brothers. We were the same age and ran with the same crowd. The main difference between Anthony and me lay in our intellectual capacity. I don't mean to say that Anthony was stupid or anything like that. He simply didn't know how to use his intelligence in a way that kept him out of trouble with the law. Although we carried out most of our illegal activities together, he was the one who most often ended up in the hands of law enforcement. One evening, Anthony and I broke into a warehouse located in the Port District. We were looking for merchandise that could be easily stolen and resold for quick cash. The security guards had apparently noticed us sneaking into the building through a side window. They were waiting for us when we climbed back out through the same window, carrying several boxes of MP3 players. One of the guards grabbed Anthony just as I turned back around. The other guard tried to stop me, but I threw one of the boxes straight into his face. I jumped onto his back and struck him in the head with all my strength. When I knocked him to the ground, he released Anthony. I shouted for Anthony to get out of there as fast as he could. Anthony turned and ran. The second guard regained consciousness and grabbed me from behind. After that, I didn't put up much of a fight. The guards had their fun with me until the police arrived. When law enforcement showed up, They laughed along with the guards as they looked over my battered, bloodied face and body. I was transported to the police station and placed behind bars until my parents arrived to take me home. To shorten a long story, I never once mentioned the name of the other guy who had been with me in the warehouse. I was sentenced to 2 weeks in jail plus probation. Anthony called me several times to apologize for running when the guards caught me. I told him it was fine, because if he had been arrested, with his prior record, he would have served a year or more in prison. He swore that he would repay me someday, even if it took the rest of his life. My parents were furious and deeply humiliated by my arrest. My father whipped me with his leather belt until my skin nearly broke. After that, they informed me that they were sending me to St. Peter's Catholic School, because I needed to be straightened out by any means necessary. Needless to say, the nuns and clergy did an excellent job enforcing discipline. By my senior year, I had transformed my lifestyle. One of the priests, who became my mentor, encouraged me to choose a different path in life. As it turned out, I left the neighborhood gang behind and eventually finished that year so well that I was accepted into Pennsylvania State University. Once again, to keep things brief, I excelled academically and earned a degree in human resources management. After graduation, finding a position with a reputable company wasn't difficult. For the first time, my parents finally felt proud of me. Although I dated numerous women during my college years, I never felt ready for a serious, long-term relationship. It was 3 years after earning my degree that I met Jennifer Facanio. She was the first woman who made me seriously consider giving up the bachelor lifestyle. We met at a professional seminar for human resources specialists. After the seminar ended, I asked for her phone number and told her I would call. She seemed genuinely pleased by the idea. Jennifer was unlike any woman I had ever been involved with. It felt as though her personality had many layers. At times, Jennifer reminded me of Joanne Woodward in The 3 Faces of Eve. The trait I liked least about her was her stubbornness. Once Jennifer took a position on an issue, there was no way to change her mind, no matter how flawed that position might have been. Our relationship during the courtship phase was not consistently stable. We did not become physically intimate during the first year of dating. I later learned that Jennifer had been abandoned as an infant. Her mother left her on a bench in the back of a church and disappeared from her life forever. Her early years were spent in an orphanage, followed by several foster homes once she reached adolescence. I firmly believe that the absence of a mother figure who could provide love and care was the root cause of most of the issues in Jennifer's personality. Despite all her emotional complexities, Jennifer was the most loving and warm-hearted person I had ever known when she was with me during those early years. My parents were not particularly fond of Jennifer while we were dating. They regularly warned me that I would regret becoming too deeply involved with her. I ignored their sensible advice. Jennifer and I were married in a modest ceremony at my local church. We mutually agreed to postpone having children until we were financially secure and she could leave her job to devote herself fully to motherhood. This decision did not sit well with my parents. Problems in our marriage began to surface during our 3rd year together. The company Jennifer worked for was acquired by a larger corporation, and her position was eliminated. She fell into a deep depression over losing a job she genuinely loved. We had no financial difficulties, although her salary had been a welcome monthly contribution to our savings account. It took several months before Jennifer finally found another position. It wasn't a job she had ever dreamed of. The role was that of an office manager at the real estate firm Colchis. I tried to be as supportive as possible during Jennifer's period of unemployment. At times, I sensed that she resented the fact that I had a job I truly enjoyed, while she had to settle for something less fulfilling. For a long time, she exhibited significant mood swings, especially around her monthly cycles. After several months at Colchis, she gradually began to regain her familiar, pleasant nature. Things started to improve for both of us. Our intimate life, which had suffered greatly during Jennifer's unemployment, also began to revive. There were moments in our bedroom when I felt Jennifer was trying hard to make up for the difficult period by being more aggressive in her affection. I never complained. For approximately 9 months, our marriage was at its peak. Jennifer became more enthusiastic about her position. She even began a home-based real estate education course. I took great pleasure in the changes in her behavior and in the loving wife she was becoming for me. And then the situation arose, one with both positive and negative consequences. The positive aspects. I was demonstrating a slow but steady rise through the management hierarchy within my corporation. I had been with the company for 5 years, and my future looked highly promising. Then a merger took place with a corporation based in Atlanta, Georgia, which triggered a significant transformation of my professional responsibilities. The Atlanta corporation needed to be integrated into our corporate structure. As a result, I was given responsibility for training their staff and carrying out workforce reductions if I deemed it necessary. I was genuinely energized by my new professional challenges. The negative aspects. My new assignment meant that I would be spending a great deal more time traveling on business, frequently out of town and away from home for extended periods. Jennifer was far from enthusiastic about the prospect of me being on the road so much. Even during longer stretches of travel, I still managed to return home on weekends. At first, this seemed to soften Jennifer's resentment toward my frequent absences. However, and there is always a however, over time, my weekend returns home no longer seemed sufficient to compensate for the time I spent away. Jennifer shifted into her stubborn mode of thinking, insisting that I enjoyed being away from home, and she subtly implied that I might have a mistress in Atlanta with whom I was spending my time. Nothing I did or said could pull her away from that negative mindset. I called her at work during the day and every evening when she was home. I sent flower arrangements to her office and emailed her playful greeting cards. Her emotional distance from me persisted. It took me more than half of the 6-month period to complete the staff training in Atlanta. My days as a traveling employee were coming to an end. In addition, I was offered a promotion at corporate headquarters. These were 2 developments I believed would change Jennifer's attitude toward me. I was wrong. It seemed that the moment I stopped traveling, Jennifer began working longer hours at the agency. I tried to ask her about the reasons behind her schedule. She responded with a sarcastic remark about how it was now her turn to focus on climbing the career ladder. She even said it was time for me to understand what it felt like to be alone in the evenings. Our intimate life was running on empty. 2 weeks ago, Jennifer informed me that she and several colleagues from her agency would be away for the weekend, attending a special presentation hosted by a developer who was beginning construction on high-rise condominiums along the waterfront. She stated that she needed to be involved from the earliest stage of cooperation with this developer. She didn't ask whether it was acceptable for her to be gone the entire weekend. She was going, and that was the end of the discussion. Although I stopped running with the younger generation of the mafia while I was still in high school, I kept in touch with a few of my closest friends, especially my friend Anthony. I called him and suggested we attend the Steelers-Raiders game on Sunday. Without hesitation, he agreed, and we were set for the game. Anthony always had a way of getting the best tickets to Steelers games. I told him that Jennifer would be away on business for the weekend. In response, he suggested that I spend the entire weekend with him and the guys, catching up on everything going on back in our old neighborhood. The prospect of a weekend away from home, and away from my wife, sounded extremely appealing to me. I decided not to inform Jennifer of my plans. Another cold breakfast passed between us at the table on Friday morning. I briefly asked Jennifer whether she had a phone number where I could reach her while she was away. She replied icily that I shouldn't bother calling her while she was gone, as she would be spending time with some very influential people. Receiving phone calls from her husband would make her feel as though I were a father monitoring his teenage daughter. I didn't pursue the matter any further. Later that afternoon, Jennifer took her weekend bag and headed to the airport in Atlantic City. Anthony was genuinely happy to see me. It had been more than a year since we had last gotten together. I seemed to be one of the few guys from the younger mafia crowd who had managed to escape the old neighborhood without spending additional time behind bars. Anthony also never failed to remind me of the unpaid debt he owed me. "Anything you ever need, JC, just call Anthony, and I'll take care of it for you." Saturday night was spent at the Sweet Kitty Lounge on the southeast side of the city. The strip club could have easily passed for the Bada Bing from The Sopranos. There were a dozen or more young, barely dressed girls dancing on the stage and giving lap dances on the floor. A sweet young thing, she couldn't have been a day over 18, approached and began grinding her smooth backside right in front of my face. "Come on, JC, she's yours all night if you want her," Anthony said, squeezing her left breast. "Sorry, Anthony, but you know me. Always faithful to my marriage vows. I won't deny that I'm tempted, but I believe in loyalty and commitment." I looked at the stunning young stripper and simply shook my head no. She hesitated for a moment, then moved on to try her luck with another aroused male customer. Damn, you really take this whole fidelity thing seriously, don't you, JC? Anthony said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. That's right. Without loyalty, nothing exists. Not love, not marriage. The following morning, Pittsburgh greeted its residents with the kind of weather it was known for, cold temperatures and a biting wind. For thousands of fans, however, none of that mattered. Streams of people from every corner of the city were heading toward Three Rivers Stadium to witness the clash between the Steelers and the Raiders with their own eyes. The rivalry between these teams had long since transcended sports. It resembled a feud bordering on open street warfare. Old grudges had never faded from memory. Ever since the Steelers snatched victory from what appeared to be inevitable defeat in one of the most iconic moments in NFL history. After a miraculous deflection placed the ball into Franco Harris' hands, allowing him to make the legendary catch that changed the course of a brutal defensive battle against the Oakland Raiders in the very first playoff game at Three Rivers Stadium, neither side had forgotten that legacy. Perhaps the only thing preventing an outright brawl was the ban on weapons in the stands. The season had been an average one for the Steelers. At that point, their record stood at 5 wins and 5 losses. That was precisely why this game was considered the most important of the year. The silver and black were back in town once again, and the tension was palpable long before kickoff. The game unfolded as a relentless fight from the opening whistle to the final second. I screamed myself hoarse, shouting and cheering despite the pain tearing through my throat. The final score reflected a razor-thin margin, Steelers 21, Raiders 20. It felt like the day couldn't possibly get any better. At least, that's what I believed at the time. Anthony insisted that I stay and celebrate the victory with the guys and do some serious drinking. I declined, promising, another time. I knew the following day at the office would be brutal, and a hangover would only add unnecessary weight to an already heavy load. Besides, Jennifer was supposed to return home that evening, and I wanted to be there when she walked through the door. Jennifer never came home Sunday night. On Monday morning, I drove to work with a sense of oppressive doubt that had lingered since the weekend. Every time I reflected on our marriage, a distinct feeling of impending disaster surfaced. Yes, all relationships go through difficult phases. But more and more, it felt as though something far more serious than a routine marital crisis was unfolding between us. The workday met my expectations. It was exhausting and intense. Several high-level meetings, along with an intimacy harassment lawsuit filed against the company, completely consumed my schedule. It wasn't until around 5:30 in the evening that I was able to sit down and check my email for the first time all day. Among a dozen messages from employees and legal documents related to the lawsuit, one subject line stood out sharply from the rest. It looked as though it was screaming directly from the screen. Who's the last one to find out? I opened the message expecting to see some stupid joke file or an animated gag. Instead, a photograph of Jennifer appeared on my screen, locked in a tight, unmistakably intimate embrace with another man. They were kissing on the lips. Beneath the image was a short message. Want to see what happened next? Click the following link. A chill ran down my spine. I stared at the photograph of Jennifer kissing another man, hesitating for several seconds. Then I clicked the link. A new image appeared. This time, both of them were naked, standing together in a motel room. The caption beneath the photo was identical. Want to know what happened after this? Click the following link. My hand began to tremble involuntarily. My throat and chest tightened as the naked image of my wife burned itself into my memory. Part of me begged not to open the next image. But I knew I had to. The third photograph marked the final end of my marriage. Jennifer was on all fours on the bed with the same man. Her face was frozen in an expression of lust and ecstasy. The only woman I had ever loved unconditionally had turned out to be a traitor. I had trusted her completely and without reservation. Now she was tearing my heart straight out of my chest. Beneath the image was the caption, courtesy of Robert Tulson. My worst nightmare was no longer imaginary, it had been shoved directly into my face. There was no longer any doubt. Jennifer's coldness over the past several months had not been ordinary marital frustration. It resembled rigor mortis, the unmistakable sign of a dying marriage. After the anger and rage subsided, another sensation took hold, cold, focused determination. The kind I hadn't felt in a very long time. It was the determination of revenge. Betrayal and infidelity had no place in my life. Two people were going to pay the ultimate price for what they had knowingly done to me. My thoughts immediately turned to the sender of the incriminating emails. The message contained no name, no hint as to its origin. Why had someone chosen to show this to me? What did they want? Revenge, truth, leverage? Were they my allies or Jennifer's enemies? That question could wait. I inserted a CD into my computer and saved a copy of the email along with all 3 photographs. Then I deleted the message and ran a wiping program that destroyed any digital trace left on the hard drive. Leaning back in my chair, I tried to make sense of the betrayal of our marriage. The only explanation that came to mind was Jennifer's fractured, multifaceted personality. If she had wanted a divorce, I would have agreed without resistance. We could have gone our separate ways. But now retribution had to be swift and final. There would be no prisoners. No mercy. A plan began to take shape in my mind. I left the office building, turned the corner, and used a payphone. The number I dialed belonged to a disposable, untraceable cell phone. "Anthony, I think it's time for you to repay the debt you owe me," I said. Around 7:30 that evening, I returned home. Jennifer was already there, watching television. She didn't stand up, didn't approach me for a hug or a kiss. She simply glanced at me and said flatly, "You're late." "So are you," I replied, heading into the kitchen. Not another word was exchanged between us. I grabbed a beer from the refrigerator and went into the spare room I had long since converted into a home office. I locked the door behind me. In this country, serious crimes typically carry one of 2 sentences: the death penalty or life imprisonment. My plan for revenge accounted for exactly that: 1 death and 1 life sentence. I needed time alone to finalize the details. Anthony would handle his part. He would settle my score with Mr. Robert Tulson. As for Jennifer, I would take care of that myself. I needed everything to look, to the police, like a simple case of a wife who had run away from a caring husband. Over the next few days, I regularly sent flowers to Jennifer's office so everyone there would see that her husband still cared. I reserved a table at a restaurant near her workplace and left a message asking her to meet me there for dinner. She didn't show up. I asked the maitre d' to give our table to other guests, and made sure he remembered that my wife never arrived. Later that evening, Jennifer came home without explanation and without apology. Her excuses no longer mattered to me. The die had been cast, and the machinery of revenge was already in motion. The next day, a courier arrived at my office with an envelope marked "Personal and Confidential." Inside was a sheet of paper instructing me to destroy it after reading. The first sentence read, "Secure an airtight alibi for tomorrow evening." The second contained a name, Carlos Maindara, and a phone number. I memorized the number, then shredded the paper and disposed of the fragments in different trash bins outside the building. That evening, I arrived home before Jennifer. I changed clothes, poured myself a tall glass of Jim Beam, and put on soft jazz. The television stayed off. This was my evening, my castle, my rules. Jennifer could take care of her own entertainment. When she returned home, there was no confrontation. After taking in the atmosphere, she turned around and walked back out. Where she went, I didn't know. Dinner, perhaps. Or back to Robert Tulson. I didn't care. The sand in the hourglass was nearly run out for both of them. I was already asleep when Jennifer returned and quietly slid into bed beside me. Silence was the loudest sound that night. Thursday evenings were traditionally poker night for a few of my coworkers. I occasionally joined them, not for the game, but for the information. Relaxed men with drinks in hand often reveal more than they should. The meeting took place in the back room of the old Stagecoach bar. That, in itself, provided me with an indisputable alibi. This time, I returned home in the early hours of the morning. The clock read 2:35 when I got into bed. Not a sound from Jennifer. Falling asleep was easy, despite knowing exactly what had happened that evening. Robert Tulson had received his death sentence. It was now time to start counting down the punishment for the second guilty party. No immediate action was necessary. The awareness that Jennifer's sentence would begin with just one phone call gave me a strange sense of satisfaction and justice. Whatever distortions existed in her personality no longer mattered to me. I felt no sympathy for the woman I had once loved with my entire heart. What awaited her was the direct result of her own decisions. The police questioned all employees at the Calcas Realty Agency. They collected several contradictory but intriguing statements. Jennifer was summoned for questioning more than once. Detective Lawrence Beckton visited our home that same evening, questioning me about Robert Tulson. I told him I had only seen Robert once, at the agency's Christmas party for employees and their spouses. Beyond that, I had no contact with him. The detective hinted carefully that Robert and Jennifer might have been more than just colleagues. I replied that I completely trusted my wife and had no reason to doubt her fidelity. He smiled as if he were looking at a naive, duped husband. Robert Tulson's funeral took place on Tuesday. That morning, I saw Jennifer in a black dress, the same one she had worn to my mother's funeral. She didn't ask if I wanted to go with her. Regardless of her attitude toward Robert's death, she kept him close. I was certain her mind was busy, with thoughts of the murder and of betrayal. Over the next week, she made several attempts to start serious conversations about our relationship. My cold silence stopped her each time. I was not in a mood for reconciliation. My finger was already on the button. 3 weeks had passed since Robert's murder, and the investigation had reached a dead end. No new leads had surfaced. Some speculated that he might have been killed by loan sharks or bookmakers. During this time, Jennifer's mental state noticeably deteriorated. She became distracted, anxious, and easily frightened by small things. I didn't offer her a single hand of help, even as I watched her struggle. Serves you right, I thought, observing her slow unraveling. Finally, the following Thursday, I called Carlos. The plan was ready, and he showed no impatience. Jennifer had only a few hours left before her new life would begin. On Friday morning, I left for work before Jennifer had even dressed. I deliberately avoided seeing her for the last time in my house. The sand in the hourglass had already run out. Across from our house, a car sat with 2 men inside. The abduction took place at an intersection with a 4-way stop. Vehicles in front of and behind Jennifer's car simultaneously blocked any possibility of maneuvering or escape. The 2 men operated with the precision of a well-trained unit. As soon as the driver's side door opened, she was immediately injected in the arm while her seatbelt was cut. Jennifer was roughly thrown onto the passenger seat as one of the assailants took the wheel. 3 cars roared off at once. The entire operation took less than 30 seconds. There were no witnesses. By 11 a.m., at a bank branch on the east side of town, a woman identical to Jennifer in every detail, from hairstyle to makeup, walked in and handed the teller a withdrawal slip for $25,000 from our joint account. She presented a driver's license and passport to confirm her identity. The teller took a few minutes to process the transaction as a cashier's check. A security guard escorted the woman to her car and recorded the license plate as she drove away. The line at the American Airlines ticket counter was short when Jennifer's double approached the smiling clerk. After verifying the passport and photograph, she received a boarding pass. The flight had been booked online the previous evening. The route consisted of a flight to Kennedy Airport, followed by a direct flight, number 951, to Rio de Janeiro. The plane departed Pittsburgh at 4:45 p.m., and by 10:30 p.m. that same evening, the American Airlines flight lifted off from New York, carrying passenger Jennifer Canella to Brazil. I waited until Saturday afternoon to call the police with a missing person report. To my surprise, Detective Lawrence Beckton arrived at the house to take the statement. I told him that Jennifer had not returned home at her usual time. Attempts to reach her mobile phone resulted in a "no service" message. I also called Amanda Staccato, one of Jennifer's closest friends from the Calcas Realty Agency. Amanda confirmed that Jennifer had not shown up at work the day before and had not even notified anyone of her absence. Detective Beckton took notes in his small notebook, occasionally glancing up at me. Eventually, he began asking questions about my marriage, whether we had any problems and whether they could be related to Jennifer's disappearance. I repeated the same statements I had given him after Robert Tulson's murder. Our marriage was fine, and I saw no reason why Jennifer would disappear voluntarily. Then he asked me directly if I had any involvement in a potential crime against her. I again stated that I loved my wife and would never harm her. Lying to the police had been a skill I had honed in my youth, running with small-time mafia crews. That trait still served me perfectly. 3 days later, Detective Beckton showed up at my office in the middle of the workday. I suspected he wanted to size me up in person. When he was led inside, he sat across from me, offering a tight-lipped smile. "Do you have any updates on Jennifer's whereabouts?" I asked, giving my face the appearance of a concerned husband. "Yes and no, Mr. Canella. We traced Jennifer's movements after she left the house Friday morning. Several people reported seeing her around 10 o'clock at Denny's on Bennett Street. Then she appeared at Allegheny National Bank around 11. We have video of her withdrawing $25,000 from your joint account." He paused, watching my reaction closely. I didn't flinch. "She withdrew that much?" I repeated, feigning shock. "That's impossible. She would have told me. The facts suggest otherwise. The teller made copies of her documents before processing the check. I'm confident you'll recognize your wife on the video." He paused again. "I think there must be some mistake, Detective. Jennifer and I discuss everything concerning our marriage." I looked at him with unmasked astonishment, knowing the worst was yet to come. "The most troubling part," he continued, "is that your wife purchased airline tickets to New York and then onward to Rio de Janeiro. Her car was found at the airport long-term parking. She departed Pittsburgh at 4:45 p.m., and from New York at 10:30 p.m. After arriving in Rio, she disappeared." I raised my voice. "That's absurd. Jennifer would never do such a thing. Fleeing the country, complete nonsense." I cried in front of him. Silence filled the office. "Could this be connected to Robert Tulson's murder?" he asked. "How dare you?" I snapped. "You interrogated her yourself. We didn't accuse her, but she was among the suspects. Some claimed she and Tulson were lovers." "You need evidence, not office gossip," I replied coldly. "We are continuing the investigation. There are signs the murder had an intimacy motive. Tulson was tortured for several hours before being strangled." I let out a short laugh. "You seriously think my wife could have done that? Perhaps she had help. And you think it was me. We considered it, but you had an alibi." I summarized everything aloud and then ended the conversation. I opened the door, signaling that the meeting was over. It was a Saturday morning, 2 weeks after Jennifer's disappearance. I had no news from Carlos or Anthony. I didn't know where she was or what was happening to her. Sometimes, I felt as though I was being watched. I acted cautiously, giving no reason for suspicion. I called Detective Becton regularly. No news. The police in Rio found no trace of Jennifer. That day, I ordered a pizza from Domino's. When the delivery guy left, I opened the box. Inside was an envelope. "Dress for church tomorrow. 10 a.m. Mass at St. Peter's. Exit through the east side doors during communion. A dark Ford Crown Victoria will be waiting. Get in." I understood that this would be my final meeting with Jennifer. St. Peter's Church was large. The 10 o'clock Mass gathered hundreds of people. I easily got lost in the crowd and slipped out unnoticed through the side doors. The dark sedan was already waiting. Within 10 minutes, we stopped at a warehouse. Inside, Carlos greeted me in person for the first time. "Anthony said I could call you JC. That true?" he said. He warned me that the past few weeks had been difficult for Jennifer. "I don't care," I replied. She was tied to a chair. Her eyes were empty. I spoke to her slowly and clearly. She remained silent. A single tear appeared in her eye, and that was enough. After 3 years, I had almost forgotten Jennifer. Both of Becton's cases were archived. I sold the house. The marriage was closed for me forever. Later, I learned that the email had been sent by Amanda Staccato. She, too, got her revenge. Sometimes, children should listen to their parents. But they almost never do. And now I tell you about 2 more stories. Me and my boyfriend. What would you do if something like this happened to you? Could you forgive it? I never imagined that a moment like this would come in my life, when I would seriously question such a thing. I never thought I would find myself in a situation where trust, which had always seemed unshakable, would be called into doubt. But that's exactly where I ended up. Michael and I have been together for almost 5 years. By February, it will be exactly 5. Throughout all that time, I trusted him completely. Over the years of our relationship, I never had a single suspicion. I never once thought he could betray me. Maybe this sounds naive, or even childish, but he never gave me a reason to doubt him. That's why my trust in him was absolute. Recently, Michael started a new job. One evening, his phone completely died. He was late for his shift, and I was very worried. A similar situation happened again a short time later. His phone was off again, and I couldn't reach him. I worried that he might miss work again, so I tried calling him late at night and again early in the morning. I woke up fairly early. He was supposed to start work at 7 in the morning, and I opened my eyes around 6. I had the thought to stop by, just as a caring gesture. I wanted to make sure he was okay, that he was awake and ready to leave. Or, if he had already left, I could put my mind at ease. When I arrived at his house, I immediately noticed that he was still there. As I entered, I saw a set of keys and a woman's purse on the living room table. At that moment, I felt a sense of unease. As I approached the bedroom, I saw a woman inside. Despite his attempts to stop me and keep me away from the door, Michael insisted that things weren't what they seemed. But I saw with my own eyes that the woman was lying on the bed. He claimed that she hadn't really been there and reassured me that only he and his friend, who supposedly left very early in the morning, had been in the room. According to him, he asked the woman just to sit and wait because I was nearby, and he anticipated a difficult conversation. But lying on the bed? That level of comfort and ease didn't fit his explanation and raised even more questions. The situation escalated quickly. Tension rose, voices were raised, insults were exchanged, and objects started flying across the room. Eventually, the woman left the house, and Michael tried to give a detailed account of what had happened. He explained that they had met the night before. According to him, she had helped him with something, bought drinks, and offered one to him. He decided to accept a single drink at his place, supposedly just out of politeness and gratitude. He insisted that he immediately told her he had a girlfriend, and that he talked about me throughout the evening. Later, he said, his friend arrived, and the three of them simply spent time together. The woman got very drunk, and he let her stay the night on the couch. He repeatedly stressed that there had been nothing intimacy or romantic between them, and that it had been limited to just having a drink. From my perspective, it looked entirely different. From the very first moment, it felt like the end. The only promise we had ever made to each other in our relationship was that we could face any hardship together. But any situation involving other men or women, in any form, had always been completely unacceptable to us. I was confident that I could uphold this principle and stay strong. But a few days passed, and it became incredibly difficult. Michael continues to try to make things right, insisting that nothing happened, asking me to trust him. I really do love him very much. And behind this relationship are 5 years of my life, my emotions, and my efforts. If you were in my shoes, could you forgive something like this? Next one. How would you handle this situation? Trigger warning. Infidelity. A few years ago, right after finishing college, I moved to New York City. During that period, I had my first intimacy experience with a man. At that time, I was in a relationship with a girl I had known since school. I confessed my betrayal to her, and after that, we broke up. It was painful for her, but eventually, she started seeing another guy she was in love with. I am not trying to justify my actions. What I did was wrong. Around the same time, I met a woman on Reddit. I was 22, and she was 26. I was buying content from her, and she also sold it to other men. We communicated through video calls. During our conversations, she would mention that she wanted to have intimacy with men of certain ethnic backgrounds. She also talked about her fantasy of sleeping with her best friend, whom she had known for 10 years, and shared other similar fantasies. She often mentioned another man. In many of the videos I bought from her, this man also appeared. She told me she hoped he would cheat on her because she considered him too soft. She even mentioned a specific female friend he was communicating with and said she wasn't sure if he was cheating, but if he was, she claimed she would even be okay with it. Eventually, it turned out that we were in the same city. I invited her to celebrate my birthday. During the party, I was using drugs and at one point got undressed. She stayed the night, and the next day we had intimacy for the first time. After that, we slept together a few more times, but eventually stopped because I started seeing a guy the first potentially wanted a serious relationship with. Later, she told me she had cancer and said she wanted to have intimacy one more time, just in case she died. We did. Fortunately, she survived. After that, she said she wanted to sleep with a doctor. I initially took it as a joke, but later I found the doctor, and it turned out they were friends on Facebook. The entire situation felt very strange to me. At the same time, I valued our friendship even more than the intimacy relationship. So much so that at one point, I even planned to hire her brother for my freelance agency. She would record our intimacy on her phone and send me the videos. Later, I moved back to my hometown, gradually lost contact with her, and deleted all my social media accounts. About a year later, when I was back in New York for work, I messaged her through Instagram, which I had specially created again. However, I received no response. Almost 5 years passed, and I had nearly forgotten this story. But recently, while scrolling through Instagram, I came across her profile again. I saw that the man who had been in the videos she sent me, and whom she had called her boyfriend, was still with her. They had been together for around 10 years. I do not know if they had an open relationship. I am also not sure if she had intimacy with anyone else besides me. But the entire situation started to trigger intense feelings of guilt and disgust toward myself. I do not know whether I should tell this man the truth. Ethically, it seems like I should. But practically speaking, I fear the possible consequences. I do not want him to find me or cause me physical harm. It is hard even to imagine how painful it could be. Being there with a woman during her battle with cancer, only to discover that she had intimacy encounters with at least one other man and recorded it on video. According to her, her boyfriend knew about what she was doing and the content she was selling. She also said he knew about our encounters. What would you do if you were in my position? I realized that my behavior in this story was terrible. Since then, I have grown and changed a lot.